It appears to be working. Maybe it's working. I may actually be live on YouTube again. Imagine that. Let's let everyone know. That's exciting. Cool. I think we're all good to go there. Let me just pull up YouTube chat. Oh, but I have to do the thing, don't I? I have to... Yeah, let me... Hey, Dropkicks! So if I pop out... Yeah. Thank you very much. Good to be back. Definitively. Let me pull up... Let me see if I can do that. Lower third... See if this actually works or not. I don't know. Hey, Burning One. Good to see you. See, this is the thing. When I go live on YouTube, folks just show up immediately. It's kind of crazy. So it looks like the YouTube chat is not working. Oh, it is. Just taking a little while for it to filter down. Good. Just got to play around a little bit. That is good to feel. Hey, Game Escape. So good. Maybe we will continue with this in future, since certainly people seem to jump right on this compared to Twitch. And of course, it archives straight to YouTube, which is nice. And YouTube is certainly more convenient, all things considered. Probably still continue doing Twitch for the video gaming. Nothing wrong with that. But this is nice. It's good to be back. It's good to be here. I'm certainly never I'm never showing any videos ever again on this after all that happened. It does feel nice, definitely. Feels kind of like home. I mean, YouTube has its own problems, don't get me wrong, but oddly enough, this feels, well, it's where I made my mark, it's where I made my name, and it's good being back on there. So, yeah, YouTube's better at finding an audience. It's easy to find the audience on Twitch if you're doing video gaming, you know, to pull in folks if you're streaming Fortnite or whatever. But that's not the kind of thing I do. I played Fortnite. I enjoy Fortnite, but it's not something that I'm going to spend hours doing every day. Unless I want to like build that audience, which I don't want to do because I care about anime and other things more than video games. Or at least those kinds of video games. Anyway. So tonight I definitely did want to. So I guess last week on the ANN cast, which is Anime News Network's podcast, they had an interview with the president of Right Stuff, and talking about kind of anime retail. Let me grab some water. It's in the other room. And it kind of struck me how interesting it was, because they asked him, you know, how is anime retail these days? I mean, you're selling mostly DVDs and, you know, manga and other anime merch. How is it? And he said, great. You know, Right Stuff's one of, probably I would argue Right Stuff is the biggest anime retailer in the sense of company dedicated to selling anime and only anime, and manga and otaku and such, otaku merch. And yeah, he said it's going very well. But he explained that the way that's moving is towards relatively expensive box sets. That basically, so what's happening is folks are realizing that anime on a streaming service doesn't last forever, and eventually it goes away. So it is worthwhile to have the physical media, so you'll be able to watch it in a few years. But the problem is people aren't really interested in spending the money on discs if it's just the discs. They need something more. So they did the Tequila Shot Glass for their G Gundam release, which is kind of hilarious. Hey, Fisher. Good to see you. So he was saying, the kind of the challenge is you can't just dump it on DVD or Blu-ray. You really have to include all of this other material into the box set. And the problem is that's complicated and expensive to do. You can't just make one of them. You have to do a a run of that box set, it makes it inordinately more complicated, because back in the day, say ADV could do a run of a box set, and if they ran out, they could just do another run of the box set, because it's just the DVDs and such. But when you're also packaging in shot glasses or books or other things like that, you can't easily do multiple runs of those necessarily, or at least you have to coordinate all those multiple runs of all those different things. And he was talking about how for the Tyler box set, somebody suggested that he include a model kit of the ship with there. By the way, there is no model kit that he's aware of that's in production for Tyler. So it's like, okay, so I'm going to have to go commission a model kit. Have it designed, have it stamped out, have it made in plastic, packaged, included in the box. No, like that's just never going to happen. And because, as he pointed out, like I could make one for $1,000, I could make 50 for like $800, but I need to make thousands and thousands of them to get them down to like the $5 or $10 you'd need to include them in a big box set. And there's just nobody's going to buy that many of that thing. So it struck me interesting two things, both that anime on disc is selling reasonably briskly, but also that it's getting increasingly complicated. So only people who know what they're doing, if you will, can get into it. It's kind of worrying in a sense, because back in the day, when there was increased demand, you would get these companies that did other things, that just did, video, and they would get into anime because they had all of the equipment, and they could just and they were licensing Hong Kong action films or weird horror films. And they're like, well, we'll just license an anime, and we'll go through the same process. We have all the same stuff to do all that. So it's pretty easy to get into all that. But now it's not increasingly in the future. It's kind of like, if you want to do those box sets, you have to know what the audience is going to respond to, like the tequila shot glasses. So in G Gundam is well known for its absurd mecha designs, and the design for Neo Mexico is a Gundam with a sombrero on it, and it is literally called Tequila Gundam in the anime series. Terrible. And so they have a tequila shot glass in the box set, because of course you do. So that makes a lot of sense, but somebody who isn't into anime just doesn't know that, doesn't grok that. So that is kind of worrying. That I don't know, if that's going to actually work kind of long term. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is that something that would worry you? That anime is getting increasingly specialized? Or is that just the nature of the medium, that you kind of have to be a fan to market to the fans? And granted, that was true to an extent back in the day, where you couldn't just license anything. You had to license something that the anime fans would actually respond to. And there were certainly companies that got into it and licensed weird things, and it all fell apart. So I don't know. It is strange. Maybe it's not as big of a deal as I think it is, but it certainly feels a little like, who knows? Why can't? There we go. Now the one thing, there we go. Now I can actually see the analytics, but I can't see it. There's some easier. Oh, there's a little thing. Okay, all right. Yeah, that is nice that Right Stuff has the big sales, and so you can often get anime for cheap on there, really cheap, and you can find some neat new stuff. I've got some things I bought because I'm like, I have no idea what this is. I'm very curious. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, is this true in other mediums? Is it or in other genres either? Are kids' Blu-rays and DVDs getting increasingly specialized? Are I don't know, K-drama box sets over here? Do they do that? Do they even have K-drama box sets? There's got to be a market for that, right? There got to be some people buying those. And of course, the other problem there is what happens when Right Stuff, goes out of business. Like, no company lasts forever, and so if Right Stuff goes, there goes a major company in the industry. And Funimation, I'm sure, is actually, it's a good question. What are Funimation's box sets like? As I recall, they're pretty bare bones. And Funimation can get away with it because they have the big ones, the big shows. So I can grok that. But it is interesting. I'm kind of surprised actually that Crunchyroll hasn't gotten into making DVD releases. I suppose it is its own thing. It's a whole different business than streaming. So maybe they're like, let's not expand too far. Yeah, and that's a good point. Dropcakes, Raven, how people are somewhat moving away from physical media. So, yeah, Gundam Below. Gundam Seed is coming too. He said they're still making the dub for that one, the new dub for Gundam Seed. But he said that should come in 2019. But they're currently finishing up release of Gundam 00. It's funny, he kept calling it 00. And then at one point he corrected himself. Oh yeah, 00. It's 00. When you're outside, I remember I used to call Gundam X Gundam Chi for a long time because they had Turn A Gundam and V Gundam and all these things, and so I thought it was Greek letters. It was Gundam Chi. That's what X in Greek. No, just Gundam X. I love Gundam X. I have a cell from Gundam X actually. One of those shows that not enough folks have appreciate that anime. It is a shame. I'd love to see how many people are literally actually moving away from physical media. We watched a movie at work the other day, and there was this interesting thing where they this guy wanted to show this movie, and he came in and just plugged in his laptop and pulled up, I think it was iTunes, and just played it off of there. He doesn't own. I mean, even if he does own a physical copy, it's just easier to plug in and stream it. That's true. Special edition games is a very good point, and they talked about how it's that's also tied into the budgets of video games, where it's when you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, there just aren't enough people willing to buy it at a price point that makes it reasonable, so you have to have an $80, $120 version of that game. Yeah, PA Works is working on, they have an anime coming out this season, I think, don't they? If I recall. But yeah, video games are in I don't want to say a tough spot, but they're definitely dealing with, there we go, just ballooning budgets, and at least for the AAA games, and it's really hard for them to actually make that make sense. Hey Sebastian, good to see you. So yeah, that's an odd thing where you're spending so much cash, even if all of your fans bought your thing at $60, you wouldn't make enough money. So you have to sell those more expensive editions. I keep seeing these ads on the PlayStation Store for $100 digital editions of games, and they come with cool stuff. I'm not saying it's bad. So we're talking about how in anime we're getting these expensive DVD box sets that have a lot of stuff in them are the successful way of getting physical media out there. The people just don't buy the 4 discs in a box anymore. They expect something more cool, or more accurately, you'll get a few people interested in that stuff, but by and large, if you want excitement, if you want healthy sales, you need a really remarkable box set. Now that's a little worrying because it's much more complicated to do that, and it requires more specialization, and it requires people who know what they're doing, and you can't just have somebody come in and get into the anime industry in that in that area because they don't have the expertise. Yeah, you're right, Fisher. And the nice thing about digital, and I will be fascinated to see if Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo grab onto this with the next generation coming soon, where it would be great if and I buy a digital copy of Nier Automata, and then that works on PlayStation 4. And then PlayStation 5 comes out, and they're like, either PS5 is backwards compatible, or if we do a re-release of Nier Automata, your game works. We upgrade you to that version, and you're good to go. And maybe for a really complicated game, it's a $10 upgrade or something. But if you, buying it buys it for the future, that would be really, really cool. And again, I wouldn't mind paying something for an upgrade or for a port. I mean, porting things, it requires effort, and the people who spend the effort on that deserve to get paid for it. But the idea that I don't lose that thing just because I've got the next version of the hardware would be awesome. Yeah, you're right. Music's going in the same direction. And also, music's become even more of a commodity than it used to be. There's just so much music out there, and it's so easy to get that why should I spend money on this one album? That $15 price point just does not make sense anymore. And yet, streaming absolutely affects it. Now, what the Right Stuff guy said is that the advantage is that streaming is turning into kind of a try before you buy, where folks will go out, they'll watch it streaming, and then if they love it, eventually they will buy a physical copy because they do know that stream will eventually disappear. Well, and it's a great point, Sebastian. People who get really obsessed with these shows, at some point I'm going to say wise up. That's a bit, condescending, but at some point they do say, okay, well, I love this too much to depend on Crunchyroll for it all the time. And what happens if my internet goes down? Although that's not a problem anymore, I don't think. But that is an interesting thing. So it's certainly something to watch moving forward. But yeah, certainly digital makes a lot of sense. And granted, physical fits into the whole ecology. There's certainly stuff I've seen digitally streaming where I'm like, great, I'm glad I watched that. I don't need a physical copy of that. I will probably not return to that anytime in my life. And if I do and it's not there, that's okay. There's other things, right? It's not like if I ever want to watch this again, it'll be an overpowering desire and, oh my gosh, I can't rewatch the 3rd season of that one weird show. That's fine. Yeah. And streaming's so cheap that it makes a lot of sense to just, do that. Just get that hard copy. You just watch it streaming, and then if you really love it, okay, you now own it forever. Well, kind of forever. How long do DVDs last? I certainly have DVDs that don't play anymore. That's a little worrying. I'm going to go turn on the tea maker. 1 second. I actually, and apologies if this sounds, if this is a bit much, but I came home today and laid down for a little bit and suddenly felt very unwell and went and threw up. Don't know what was going on. I had a good dinner and I had a good lunch, and this is actually before dinner. And just suddenly my stomach was like, nope, Don't know what was going on there. So my stomach's a little upset. I feel fine, but just one of those, something's not happy down there. High School of the Dead? Yeah. Actually, he talked about the difficulties of licensing. Somebody asked, have you ever thought of getting into manga publishing? And he said, that is such a different industry that it would be really hard to spin that up, and it would take time away from everything else. And you basically need to build relationships with a completely different side of the industry. And he said, so I won't say never, but not an easy thing. And so it kind of got me thinking that, oh yeah, that's an interesting point, that we want more manga publishers. We want a lot of this manga available over here in America, or the light novels or whatever. And it's hard, you can't just go to one person who licenses all of it. It kind of has to be these different pieces of it. And the other thing he mentioned too is that, like for the Tyler box set, he wanted, he said there are light novels of Tyler. He said, and I would love to read them someday, but they've never been translated into English. And the problem is going and licensing those and getting a translation, again, involves a completely different group of people and completely different licensing rights. And the problem is, the anime folks don't want their license tied to the book licensing rights and vice versa. So it kind of annoys both sides of the house, right, to be kind of dependent on each other. So it's really hard to get those sort of mixed media packages together. And that is a relevant issue, right? That it'd be great to have an ultimate collection which includes of whatever, that has the original novels, manga, DVDs, etc. But just the chances of getting all that going is really hard. Hey Hem, good to see you. It is just complicated. It really is. I think my tea is ready. 1 second. It sure is. So I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that, let's see if I can find this. There it is. At the used bookstore, I found this really weird manga that turned out to be a self-published scanlation. Very odd. While I was there, I also picked up this other manga, which I wanted to show you guys. It's not weird, it's just very obscure, and I rather liked it. I'll probably do a little review of it. It's called Julene, and it's basically a martial arts shonen story, but made by a female mangaka in the shoujo style. So imagine shoujo martial arts. Well, here you go. Can I show that? It's a little scandalous. Let's show something. Yeah, so it's kind of Fushigi Yugi, very Sailor Moon actually. Very Sailor Moon. Right? Shoujo, but definitely, martial arts. And very much it's totally shoujo style artwork, minimal backgrounds, a lot of close-ups of faces to get stuff. You're right, don't risk anything anymore on YouTube. You're absolutely right. And there's no nudity in this, I don't believe. It's just there's an upskirt shot, so it's you don't see anything. It's just it's a leg and then a gap and a leg, but I'm enjoying it. It's a rather complicated plot. There's a lot of that weird shoujo humor out of nowhere. The girl, who is I think 16, is very much in love with an older guy, but fortunately he has no interest in her. And it's not even played like comedy. Like he's just no. And you can tell it's more of a schoolgirl crush. But it's just weird having these different art styles. It's the same mangaka who did Vampire Princess Miyu, which I think is a much better fit for the artist's style, because that is a gothic horror story, and this action just doesn't really fit too well with the style. But it's fun. And so it's basically secret ninjas. And I think there are some swords that have been stolen, or swords they're protecting, and that folks are trying to steal, and so they're trying to keep them from being stolen. A lot of sort of martial arts, ninja clan fighting stuff, which is interesting. But like Julene, Tokyo Pop release, a few volumes available in America. A very early Tokyo Pop release, it seems. I mean, you can tell with the font they chose for the not a lot of folks use that kind of font as text in manga anymore, but it's fine. And there's some nice sketches in the back. In the back. So I really love the art in this. I think the designs are very pretty. Like, this is a really nice drawing. So that's pretty cool. So just, if you see it, might be worth picking up. If you like that kind of thing. I've got volumes 1 through 3. I've only read the first volume, so once I go through more of it, I'll probably do like an actual review. Release version of the Perfect Blue original novel. I'd love to read that. Why are there so few anime about university life in Japan? A couple of different reasons for that. It's a very good question. I think part of it is because, for whatever reason, it seems like university students don't watch much anime. Like, once you're in college... Hello, blurriness. Oh, 1 second. Let's fix that. Boink, boink. So kids watch anime, teenagers watch anime, and once you get into the working world, you have the money to be able to afford anime. But university students don't seem to watch much anime. It kind of fades at that point, unless you're in a club. But yeah, there's just not a big demographic for university students watching anime, apparently. Obviously, they're out there, but it's not big. But otherwise, part of it is why there's not a lot of anime about like adults, right? Anime is generally aimed at a younger audience or an older audience that's pining for the days of their youth, and so you tell those stories. It's also, I think, a little more difficult to explain the story of a given anime if characters are in college. If you're in high school, it's a little easier to sneak off, or to, not necessarily sneak off, but to, in the middle, after school, go off and do something, and to have kind of a secret life. Whereas in university, you have all these classes you're going to, you have homework, you have spare time. But I don't think the general structure of anime stories fits university life as well, or maybe not. That kind of thing. Well, I mean, there are... so by American Pie type movie anime, you mean like, sex comedies, basically? Or like teenager sex comedies? I mean, I think they're there just in different forms. It's sex comedies, it's just sex. With comedy in it. I just saw a really... should I say this? No, I shouldn't. I will avoid that topic until another time. But... Well, that's the thing, is that... and it's why I'm kind of doubting myself now. Japanese high school is definitely more intense than college. But I think the... So you're right. That doesn't make sense. I take it back. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about hentai right now. I think part of the problem, part of the reason you don't see more overt sex comedies in Japan is just cultural. You know, you just that's just the kind of thing that you don't put on television. It's just a little too risque for the culture, I would say. Again, it's kind of a thing that stuff. Yeah, exactly. Who knows what YouTube will nail us for now? And let's just, well, I just want to be safe. I already have several strikes against me, apparently. So, oh, who knows? And all it takes is someone reporting you. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, certainly we have a long history of comedic, sexy movies. You know, Porky's, being a great example, and that was from the '70s, right? So, yeah, it's certainly been out there for a long time. Golden Boy is absolutely a sex comedy, and that is what I would say is an example of an American Pie type of story in anime. But it's how many other things are there like that? It's vanishingly rare to see that kind of a story, I would say. So I will say I have certainly come across hentai that are comedic, that are just funny, funny, goofy stories. But it's not it's not that kind of R-rated American Pie, Porky's, Hangover even. Very different stuff. Ooh, that feels good. Throat coat tea goes down good. But yeah, Japanese media. Interesting question. I mean, I think the reason we don't see it as much on TV is because there was some debate recently about some sexiness in Shonen Jump and whether that was appropriate or not. And hey, Master Chief, exactly. So and I think it's just hard to get away with that kind of content in mass media. And obviously, it's not that American Pie movies go on TV uncut, but they certainly do go on cable and such. I don't know, but no, there's a lot of weird adult stuff that ends up on cable and things. They can certainly have that. Cherry Boy, I've actually heard of that. Well, I'd say there's plenty of R-rated anime comedy that's not hentai. Any harem anime is basically that, where girls lose their tops and guys are running around. And the Tenchi OVA is absolutely R-rated anime comedy. Oh, hey, Carl. Good to see you. I guess part of the reason is that anime came out of a tradition of science fiction and fantasy, and those kinds of stories, and out of a tradition of children's stories. So there's that just wasn't part of the medium, and so that's not a typical way of structuring your stories. You can throw in things, but Golden Boy was not one of the first OVAs. It is arguably the first ecchi OVA. It was the first OVA that was basically a sex comedy where it wasn't hentai, but it was very, very sexy and edgy, and it kind of opened up the idea of, oh, okay, there were OVAs that had that were basically additions to existing franchises, and they may have a shower scene here and there. But Golden Boy opened up the idea of, oh, okay, we can have like this, we can have overt etchiness, overt sexuality, if you will, in an OVA without going all the way to hentai. So it's arguably the first one to do that. But didn't really catch on as a genre for some reason. Again, I think sci-fi and fantasy generally has been fairly chaste. Fantasy certainly has fan service in it. You watch the 80s fantasy films in America, and there's almost always, some naked girl in it. And And science fiction stories and anime have certainly had fan service in it, but not a lot of that kind of stuff. Not a lot of overt sexuality in those stories. Although, ironically, the original fairy tales often had a very strong. They were very much symbolic about various elements of if not sexuality, then sort of gender politics and so forth. So. But yeah, I mean, we can certainly. I mean, you look at Little Sister's All You Need. That is absolutely an ecchi comedy, right? Heck, anime a couple of seasons ago where the guy was programming on an MMO and wakes up in the MMO and immediately ends up with a harem. That is absolutely an ecchi comedy, right? Hey Tonto, I had not heard that. Hmm. To Love Ru, absolutely. Is it wrong to pick up girls in a dungeon? Has that in there? I've heard Overlord does a little bit. There's some harem-ish elements to that. Oh, High School Double D, certainly. My Little Monster. Maybe not as ecchi, really. Granted. So yeah, they're out there, certainly, but just they take a different form, right? The edginess is not there. So the thing about this, the thing with Shonen Jump, is this idea that there's a big difference between innocent fan service and non-innocent fan service. So a guy walking in on a girl while she's taking a shower is very different than two teenagers deciding to go to bed together, right, and sleep together. Those are just very different things, and anime tends to very much err on the first side, where you can have nudity, you can have characters making eyes at each other, you can have characters talking about each other's physical assets and such, but it all has to be innocent. No one can ever actually go to bed together. It's one of the reasons why Gundam Seed rose a lot of eyebrows for the fact that there is a strongly implied scene between two teenage characters, one of them being the protagonist. You just didn't do that in Gundam especially, but shonen in general. So there's this, I don't know, veneer of chastity on everything. There's this implied chastity on everything. Indeed, in I think it's Please Teacher, there was a plot line involving two teenage characters who have a one-night stand, basically. And later you find out the girl's pregnant. And they have this whole very serious episode, a very special episode, basically, where they deal with that. And it's very serious and very straightforward. It's like, okay, what are the consequences here? And the writer talked about how difficult that was because of just Japanese views on those things and on the responsibilities of both parties and how to represent that in a way that in which the audience would sympathize with them and not think, well, they deserve it because they decided to sleep together, right? Dore something or other, Game Escape. Yeah, I watched the first episode of that. That's absolutely. That is. It's hentai without the sex scenes, but it is very, very adult. It definitely felt like it was made by a hentai studio too. I don't know if it was, but okay. Overlord gets more ecchi as the seasons go on, and that makes sense. How do you bring in the viewers? I'll be interested to see this coming up season. We have what's the title? The slime story. that time I got reincarnated as a slime, which starts out very, very innocent, but then has some somewhat ecchi stuff partway through, some weird fan service in the middle of it, and I'll be curious to see what direction they take, if they decide to make all of it somewhat ecchi or what. I love Re Monster, which is about a young man reincarnated as a goblin who ends up, who tries to make a good life for himself, and there's some very adult material in there, but it's written in such a way that a preteen kid reading that's just going to more or less go over his head. Like, it's just going to be, it can be interpreted by a kid very differently. So I'd be curious to see how they handle that in the anime, because you could very easily tone that down and make a much more general audience, while still implying a few things behind the scenes. But you could absolutely make it something, maybe not all ages, but something that where a parent could be like, oh, okay, he's my 8-year-old is just going to assume that they're kissing, right, when they go into that room. So that's the interesting thing too. And of course, we also have this weird situation, not weird but interesting, where you can broadcast multiple places. So the TV broadcast version is different from the cable version, different from the streaming version, different from the physical release, which makes it a lot easier to do things that are ecchi. But again, and I think that also gets back into it, where if you're going to have something that has a certain amount of ecchi content, if it's going to get on broadcast television, when you cut that stuff out, the show ends up feeling awkward. So you need something you can kind of scale, and it's easier to scale that kind of innocent, ooh, I walked in on my sister while she was changing her clothes. That's just a lot easier to scale than a fundamentally sexy premise. What is this? I come back on YouTube, and within 20 minutes, or I guess 40 minutes, we're talking about sex in anime. Come on. You guys want me to get kicked off, right? That must be what's happening, right? So, yeah, that is kind of interesting. Yeah, man. I get so much better response to things on YouTube than I do on Twitch. That's right, Carl, thank you. That time I was reincarnated as a slime, or I've been reincarnated as a slime, lots of other different titles. You are such troublemakers, it's true. That's okay, make trouble. Don't make trouble. Be remarkable. We're having some issues at work with certain students who are, shall we say, somewhat overconfident. So, is it good fan service versus bad fan service? Absolutely, yes. There is fan service that reveals character. There is fan service that furthers the plot, and then there is fan service that is purely titillating, and it is degrading. Yeah, and the other thing about fan service is, and kind of the problem with it, is that it appeals to a certain segment of the population, but it also turns off female fans much of the time. Although you can flip that with something like Free. But, kids aren't particularly interested in fan service, so any fan service you put in very much limits your audience. And any ecchi content limits the audience. So it's kind of like, well, if we just scale that back, we get a larger audience, and it doesn't hurt the plot, right? So, yeah, absolutely. High School of the Dead has annoying amounts of fan service, because the fan service actually gets in the way of the horror. It distracts you from the horror, and that's one of the reasons why I bring up High School of the Dead a lot when I talk about fan service, because that's a good example of bad fan service. I don't want sexiness in the middle of somebody's brains getting eaten out, because those are two different emotions, and when you're trying to fire them off at the same time, that no, inappropriate. So it's like, why would you do that? Like, I understand having Certainly flipping between those two tones, but when they're mixed at the same time, I find it really annoying. Exactly right, Master Chief. Imagine if The Walking Dead had fan service. It doesn't fit the tone of the show. Even in odd moments, it just would be wrong for the show. I think High School of the Dead would be much better known and much more respected if it didn't have the fan service, because it would be, the horror fans would be all over it. It would be like American fans would eat up High School of the Dead. It's just perfect in terms of zombie survival horror, but that fan service just really turns a lot of people off. If I were a woman, I would feel very uncomfortable watching High School of the Dead. Well, I think it's different because that is integrated into the plot. Halloween's a great example of that, and Halloween's my favorite live-action horror movie. Michael Myers has a complex about the thing that made him snap was watching his older sister sleep with a guy, and he thought that kind of sullied her, and so he killed her. Spoiler alert for the first 3 minutes of the movie. And so he has a psychological thing about teens having sex, and so when he's out there, that's what he goes after. Indeed, one of the sort of recurring motifs of Halloween is that if it's the characters that avoid that, they tend to avoid Michael Myers' attention. So that's actually a thing. I think it's a different thing. And the other thing is, generally speaking, in those movies like Friday the 13th, the sexiness is usually separated from the horror. You will have a sex scene, and then Jason will show up, and suddenly it'll switch over to horror. But they're not trying to make they're not layering both of those in the same scenes usually. And even if they are, it's a flip over. And that's frankly become kind of I'll call it an excuse, but a justification for all the murdering stuff in these things. That there's the murderers are getting back at these teens for their horniness. I don't think that's really true in most cases. I don't think that it's really established in the story that that's what's going on. That's the annoying thing, is that in Halloween, on the one hand, Michael is pursuing that, but he's also completely insane. There's just nothing, there's no person inside that skull. So, he'll go after horny teens, but he'll go after other people too if they get in his way. So, and he'll go after just random people if they get in his way. So, there's that is a thing that colors the films, and it allows them to have some sexy moments, but it doesn't. It's not a driving force behind the plot of the film. It's a twist, if you will. And in other films, it's just like, well, why would they care? It's one of the reasons actually I liked the original Friday the Nightmare on Elm Street. Because on Elm Street, there is a thing as to why that's happened, as to why he's interested in people, but there's nothing about the horny teens particularly attracting his ire. He just hates the particular children on this particular street. So that works because, again, it's he's not going after that particular thing. It's just that because teens are horny, they do this. So it shows up a lot in those movies. But they managed to disconnect those things, which I think was good. So yeah, it's that annoying formula thing where they establish, okay, teen horror movie has teenagers, and the 3/4 of the teenagers in the movie are sleeping with each other, and a murderer comes up and kills all of them except one of them. And we'll just have them go after the ones that are sleeping together, and then it looks like it's a morality play when it's really not, right? It's an excuse. It's a formula. Is that weird thing is that, and Hollywood's particularly weird with prudishness because Hollywood is often, it doesn't give a lick about prudishness, but especially people behind the scenes, as we've come to find out over recent years about how prudish they are in their dealings with people. But audiences consistently have these strong opinions towards how weird you can get and how creepy you can get. So, you gotta do that. Yeah. Yeah, that is odd as well. And there's also a weird blind spot for etchiness in anime fans, I think. A lot of them kind of ignore the fact that their favorite show has some very ecchi elements in it. Or just kind of dismiss it as, oh, well, it's not that bad. It's like, well, compared to anything else, like, yeah, it's as strong as most any other show. It's one of the weird things I like watching A Sister's All You Need. It starts with this really absurd fan service sequence, and you find out it is deliberately absurd. Like, it's a character writing a novel, and the opening scene of this novel, and it is meant to be, kind of the most fan servicey thing ever made. And so the story itself has fan service moments, but nobody sleeps with each other. Like, there's nothing going on, and so the fan service really feels really out of place. Like, if it was a comedy, if the fan service was similarly parodic, that would totally work. But if it's not, it doesn't, right? So, and that's a good example of good versus bad fan service. When you are making fun of something, that fan service can work in that sense. But when it's just thrown in there because you want to show a naked girl, and there's really no plot for it, and it doesn't further the plot, it's like, well, what is it in here for? Right? You only have so many episodes. Why are you wasting it on this stuff? I mean, we know why, but yeah, and exactly, free fan service for the girls. And there's certainly been other shows that have muscled men, but I love Free for hate chasing perspective. I love Free for the fact that it, it really stuck it to all the guys who could not imagine that girls actually would enjoy watching, mostly naked teenage boys cavorting in the water, when anime studios have been drawing mostly naked girls, teenage girls cavorting in the water, and folks eat it up. But also for the fact that they're like, yeah, sure, if we can have cheesecake, then we can have beefcake. Let's do that for a while. We can have a beefcake show. Come on. Give me a break. So. Okay, I need a quick research break in the other room. So let me go ahead and switch over. Haven't had any problems with the standby animation yet, so let's go ahead and switch over to that. And I'll be back in a minute or two. Continue with your discussions. All right, we are back. What non-superhero movie, a Hollywood movie, would we like to see an anime adaptation of? That's a good question. What do you guys think? One of the ones I've always wanted to see is Mad Max. You know, post-apocalyptic, gritty, serious, but you can get big with it. You can get epic with it in the, you know, Hollywood sense of epic. I think that'd be cool. Star Wars. Excuse me. Star Wars. I think Star Wars just fits into anime so well. And yeah, we have Clone Wars and such. But a proper anime adaptation of Star Wars, just, yes, please. What else? We need to see Transformers in anime? I'm kidding. I mean, I like things that are relatively big. Things that benefit from having, you know, any budget you want to show anything in the world. Let's see here. And the problem is, I think like, The Matrix is a good example where I don't need to see that in anime form. That, you know, The Matrix is basically anime, and those special effects are perfectly effective in live action. It's like, yep, that works. Yeah, and actually, I don't think I would not be interested in Harry Potter in anime, because to me, Harry Potter is, you know, the special effects in that live action totally worked. Star Trek, yeah, I would not want to see Star Trek in anime personally. For one thing, I don't like Next Generation personally. We also have a Spider-Man anime. There was a Spider-Man anime. He had a mecha. Well, yeah, there we go. You know, Osmosis Jones basically sells at work. I'll tell you what I'd also like to see. Not, you know, this is not a specific Hollywood property, but I'd love to see a large-scale epic fantasy story done in anime style. We're talking something, you know, like Lord of the Rings in terms of scope, and with that kind of budget where you can show these massive battles. We just don't see enough of that, I think, in anime. Just love to see that thing. When we've had fantasy in anime, they tended to be fairly small in scope. It'll be a few adventures in a dungeon, comedy, stuff like that. I've not seen the Star Trek cartoons. What I've seen of the Star Trek cartoons didn't really turn me on, personally. But I haven't seen enough of them to say. So, I certainly can't say. Let's see. Well, let's pivot over to the sci-fi wall. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. And part of the problem is there's some... Whoa, hello. Why am I suddenly, like, through a pool filter? There we are. For science fiction, we've reached the point where budgets are big enough to actually realize something like Ringworld. So I don't feel like I need an anime version of that, because I think Hollywood live action can certainly adapt that effectively. Redwall, well, there is a Redwall animation. There's a Redwall cartoon, so... Yeah, Lotus Wars. But Lotus Wars doesn't have any really... The battles in Lotus Wars are not... I mean, the budget on Lotus Wars was relatively low. So, you know, you don't have those big Helm's Deep style battles in Lotus Wars. And the plot is kind of very clearly a D&D campaign, just kind of being thrown together off the cuff while they're playing. I will say I would love to see a full-scale Redwall adaptation with, you know, high-budget animation, high-budget anime. The Redwall anime is the animation quality is moderate. There are some nice moments, but it's just not really great. It doesn't pop. The animation is just kind of work a day. Oh yeah, man, the rest of Nausicaa. Oh, I would buy that. I would spend the rest of my wallet on a adaptation of the rest of Nausicaa. But yeah, the stuff in that tone where it's big and epic and something where anime certainly goes there. Can certainly go there. But again, it's also tough because I don't know what kind of um, you'd need a big budget, and would you get enough budget for this kind of a thing? Hmm. What's interesting is you think of a franchise like Alien, for example, and you could certainly do Alien in anime, but does anime really add much to Alien? Does it really make that scarier or make it more remarkable? I don't think so. I certainly wouldn't mind it, but I don't think it's crying out for an anime adaptation. I don't think it benefits massively from an anime adaptation. Yeah, Monster Hunter. I think you're absolutely right, Fisher. I think Monster Hunter as a franchise make a fantastic anime series. You got all these all these hunts, all this stuff to do. I should go back and play more Monster Hunter. I really enjoyed that game. It's certainly not a no guns no swords game, but it's definitely fun. Perhaps before tonight's run or Sunday's run for Yakuza Kiwami, I'll play some Monster Hunter World. But oddly enough, I think Watchmen, the comic, would make an excellent anime series, and that's superhero, granted. Um, but I think just that approach just works really well. Oh, and yeah, this is the thing. This is in the back of my mind for a long time. This is the answer I should always give. Dune. The Dune franchise is just crying out for an anime adaptation. It doesn't have to be hugely expensive. There are certainly big moments, but it's a big old story. And I think you can write a story in that universe without just adapting the books. I'd adapt the books as well. But I think you can find places to go in that. I think there's plenty of stuff. 900 hours plus in Monster Hunter. Jeez. Yeah, no, I have like 30, maybe, if that. Yeah, we certainly had anime influenced by Hollywood movies. A lot of Blade Runner in Bubblegum Crisis, and other things. There's certainly alien-style creatures. Lily Cat, most famously, is very much a uh, anime adaptation of Alien. Except in this case, uh, it's a tentacle monster. Yet, the climax of the Watchmen comics is a tough nut to crack. The original comic version worked because it was a big, ridiculous comic book event, right? And it was kind of referencing big, ridiculous comic book events, and so it kind of fit into that world. It's why I actually liked the ending of the movie, because that would not have made sense in a live-action movie. So I think turning it into what they did in the movie, fit better. Tiger and Bunny, yeah. If you're doing superheroes. So I've been going back and watching a lot of older animation in preparation for doing some panels at Anime USA in 2 weeks. And the old Superman cartoons from the 30s and 40s, man, I'm sorry. If you like Superman, I don't care, what you think about animation. Those are Superman stories. Like, they captured Superman perfectly in those stories. It is just, and not just the character, but also the art style, the approach to storytelling, all those original ways of doing it like that. That is just a very, not just a straight adaptation, but a very loving, faithful adaptation, where they didn't just say, let's just draw the panels over again. But it's like, yeah, if you want Superman in animation, there you go. Never been done better than that, in my opinion. At least in animation. Yeah, I'm in trouble, guys. I'm doing this brief history of world animation, and I have 2 hours for this panel, and I have about 3.5 hours worth of content. So figuring out how to compress that down while still being cogent is what I'm going to be spending much of this weekend on, actually. Trying to figure out how to make all that work. Oh, that'd be fun, Fisher. You're right. Like the old school science fiction, like the sci-fi thriller horror movies would be cool. Yeah, the Blob. Oh gosh, what's the one where the people are being taken over by aliens? The whole Pod People movie, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I think you could do a really effective anime with that. Yeah, Dune. I mean, gosh, Dune is just perfect. It's big, but it's also thoughtful. It's always challenging to adapt Dune to another medium because there's so much internal stuff, internal monologues and internal thoughts, so that you know. A lot of other books will dive into characters' thoughts, but because Dune is such a unique universe, you have to understand how the characters approach their situations, what they're thinking, so that you can know whether their actions are appropriate or not. You know, the power structures are so different that you really have to understand the safeguards people have and what they believe about things, so that you can make any sense of their behavior. So there's a lot of that's a really tough nut to crack for adapting it, but yeah. Hey, JPEG Jesus or JPEG, sorry. And that gets back to that whole thing of why there's so little horror in anime, like straight horror, which is weird. Yeah, Fisher, Tales from the Crypt. We just don't get a lot of those anthology horror stories in anime. Just doesn't sell, it appears, which seems strange. Even Kitaro, and it certainly has horror in it, but they had to, I wouldn't say tone it down, but make it appeal to a broader audience. Oh, hey, Akira. Good to see you. Yep. I've been going for a little while now. Dying from a run. Well, good for you. I am trying to get back into exercise, and man, is that hard. I just need to get into a really... I think I need one of those just really strong exercise plans where I have to do a lot of different things. When it's just a little, I should run, I should do some push-ups. It doesn't really fit. It doesn't come back to the mind. Whereas if you got something complex to do, then it kind of focuses you. Bourne series, yeah. Action in general, I think would work pretty well. Yeah. I'm trying to think of what anime I would love to see adapted well into live action. What universes I'd love to see in live action. Given, again, sort of the Lord of the Rings treatment. I think, honestly, Nausicaa would work really well in live action with a big budget. It's hard to do, but I think that'd be really interesting. Again, and you need sort of a Lord of the Rings style budget, unfortunately. Golgo 13? Sure. Like I've long said, I don't know that Gundam adapts well to live action. Obviously, we've had a G-Savior, but that's a weird little experiment. And they're working on that Gundam live action movie, but Tank Police live action, sure. We laugh, but I think Tank Police actually would work really well live action because it is kind of that Die Hard style action humor, right? Oh yeah, Urasawa. I mean, Urasawa is making live action stories in manga. That'd be cool. Yeah, that's the thing. Ginger, Kira, is yeah. I do not believe that the general American audience is going to turn out in droves to see a mecha movie. I think certainly Pacific Rim was big, but I think Pacific Rim was a moment in time. I don't think a lot of folks are going to turn out for that in general, but we'll see. I don't know. Mecha is such a weird genre, let's be honest. It is a weird concept, and it's hard to take seriously. So, if you haven't grown up with it, now granted, there are a lot of folks in America now that grew up on Gundam Wing that has seen a lot of this stuff, and so they're not weird. Oh, totally, JPEG says, Neuromancer, Snow Crash. Snow Crash is begging for an anime adaptation, I think. Neuromancer certainly as well. A lot of the cyberpunk stuff. And we've certainly seen a lot of cyberpunk in anime. But yeah, that would be really cool to see. I know there have been murmurs of Hollywood versions of those. We had Johnny Mnemonic, which I've never seen. Apparently it's not as bad as you think it is. It got a very bad reputation when it came out because it wasn't a faithful adaptation. But when you think about, well, how faithful can you really adapt cyberpunk to live action? When you go back with a little bit of little kindness, it's a fun one. Yes, Keanu Reeves is still, I believe, producing the live action movie adaptation for Cowboy Bebop. He's still working on that. Not planning on being in it, but trying to push that on. He's a huge Bebop fan, apparently. Gibson bias, yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point, Ginger. Is I think Transformers has become an albatross around Mecha's neck. Now, fortunately, hopefully you can do, hopefully the Gundam movie will come at it from a much more gritty perspective where you understand the Gundams are piloted machines. They're not talking and chatting and beatboxing. So hopefully that will maybe people realize, oh, okay, it's not that kind of a movie. But we'll see. Exactly, Fish. I mean, I would love to see Dominion Tank Police because it is so rife with humor. I think there's so much fun things you can do with special effects. And I think it's, I mean, my gosh, I think James Cameron could totally pull it off. His movies generally aren't very funny, but he can certainly go in that direction. So I'd love to see that. Yeah, it's really weird. I think certainly the Gundam movie will be something of a litmus test for how well Gundam works in America. If it's approached, I want to say properly, that's kind of a conceited thing to say. Like, I know how to properly make a live action Gundam movie, but if it's done in a way that people understand, I think it has a decent chance of getting a decent audience. Yeah, and Gundam was in the Ready Player One movie, and from what I understand, like, that got a lot of attention in geek circles. Like, a lot of folks were like, "Did you see there was a Gundam in the Ready Player One trailer?" I think that worked surprisingly well. Death Parade. But yeah, and obviously there's a lot of stuff you could adapt very easily to live action because it's basically live, a lot of the harem shows, things like that. You can just do live action because, well, it's just people, right? There's no special effects. It's just a thing. I'm looking up at Akira, and here's the problem. While it would be lovely to see Akira animated, it would bankrupt Japan because the original movie was the most expensive the most expensive film made in Japan up to that point. So adapting, so doing that 5 more times in today's climate, never gonna happen. And also the manga just is such a well-told story. I don't know that you need it animated. It would be lovely to see again. I'm sure it would be beautifully done, but it's just I don't I don't know that I would want to inflict that much damage on the Japanese economy just to see those characters move. Like I think the manga works. Appleseed, a live action Appleseed, a lot of special effects, but there's just enough complexity there. There's just enough depth to the world. There are things you can kind of pull out and reflect on. I think Appleseed would work really well. What else? It's a shame that Tezuka is so hard to adapt. I saw there's a live action film adaptation of Dororo, which was pretty well done, but it like I enjoyed it, but it had to vary so much from the source material because Tezuka's designs just, you know, they all look like they're 5. Just that very childish sort of Fleischer Disney style. So yeah, it's really hard to adapt Tezuka's stuff, which is tough, which is a shame because his stuff is so interesting. I have not seen the live action Bleach movie on Netflix. Again, shonen. Oh, hey, Gene. Good to see you. Gosh, everyone's here. That's awesome. And part of the reason I ask this stuff is, you know, I saw the Rurouni Kenshin live action stuff, and I'm like, okay, yep, it can be done. We can do live action shonen, you know, live action anime style action, manga style action, and it works great. It can be done. 20th Century Boys? Yeah, again, that's so long, though. It would need to be like a 5-season show. But yeah, 20th Century Boys. And also, that's also such a Japanese thing, though, because it's all about, you know, death cults and, like, tolerance of death cults, which Japan has more than we do. And, of course, it's also playing off of Aum Shinrikyo. Mushishi, well, we do have Mushishi live action. There was the live action Mushishi movie, which was really good. And yeah, I think that would totally work as a live action. And that'd be a good example of like a Tales from the Crypt style story. Very quiet, some special effects every episode, but just enough to kind of be weird and interesting. I do wish we had more. I'm going to describe this as live action that uses the shonen fantasy style, where characters, you know, throw energy bolts and have energy shields and leap 20 feet in the air. I'd love to see more of that in live action. Just that kind of over-the-top action and powers that you don't really have to explain. Characters can just do it. And that'd be really fun. I'd love to see that done in live action, where characters just have this freedom to move and to do cool things whenever they want to. Iria, the Iria films were very much like that. And there's a live-action Mushishi film made about 10 years ago by Mamoru Oshii. It's a Japanese live-action Mushishi film. Look it up. It's pretty good. It's been subtitled. Trigun. And Trigun's a great example of that kind of over-the-top action that I think you can get across pretty well. But yeah, for some reason, no one talks about the Mushishi movie. And I'm like, Mamoru Oshii did a Mushishi film. Live action film. And it is very faithful. Like, why is this not more well known? It's strange. Kino's Journey, you're right. Kino's Journey would adapt very well to live action. That would work perfectly. There's actually a live action TV show from the 90s, I think, with the same basic premise. The Hitchhiker. That's what it was called. This is a guy who hitchhikes across like the U.S. and comes across various people, and it's sort of, you know, a different town every week. You know, no fantasy aspect, none of that stuff, but a very kind of a similar premise. Kind of interesting. I've heard it was interesting. Actually, you know, a perfect example of what I'm talking about, both in terms of sort of over the top shonen style powers and a big budget thing I'd love to see in, you know, an anime adapted into live action now that we have the special effects. Gene, you made me think about it. Outlaw Star. I think an Outlaw Star live action movie would be amazing. Especially if you didn't try to, you know, adapt Outlaw Star directly. If you said, this is our own version of Outlaw Star, we're going to kind of take the characters in our own direction, I think that'd be really fun. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. You know, okay, there was a live action version of Fist of the North Star. It was a cheesy action movie. That's fine. Pokemon live action, I agree. I love to see it. The problem with Pokemon live action is you have to have kid actors, and it's just hard to find good kid actors. But if you can find kid actors equal to the kids in Stranger Things, I think you can certainly make that happen. Yeah, I think Pokemon live action would be a lot of fun. At least a movie, you know, where you don't have to commit to a series budget, but you do Pokemon live action. What's funny is, you know, they'd all be Japanese, right? It's like you don't want to make them Japanese, right? They're in the Kanto region, so. I'd love to see a Firefly anime to that point. Firefly's a great, great anime thing, right? It's a little silly, a little over the top, very Trigun in tone. I think Firefly would work really well. I watched the first episode or two of a sci-fi series. It's been going on for a couple of years now. What is it called? Sort of a Firefly-esque show, and really enjoyed it. I was like, this would make great anime too. There's that whole idea of small group of people on one ship doing sort of bounty hunter things was really good. And I think Cowboy Bebop would make a great live action adaptation. Killjoys, thank you. That's the one. I think Killjoys would be really fun for anime. Live action Ghibli. You can certainly do it. Again, part of the problem is you have, you know, Ghibli movies tend to have kid protagonists, so finding kids who could do that is tough. The Akira Project live action trailer, yeah, I think I've seen that. There've been a few, you know, live action projects where they basically made a trailer. They're never going to make the actual film, but they put it together as a trailer. I've seen one or two of those, and it's cool to see. But again, oh my gosh, the budget for that'll be crazy. Even the live action Akira is just, and later Akira gets very non-work safe, so. See, in terms of anime to live action to anime, yeah, I think that works for me. Do you guys have any other questions? I've been going for about an hour and a half now, and I'm starting to fade a little bit here. So, what do you guys want to talk about? I have no plans on doing any videos or anything else tonight. This is just a time to chat, get back in touch with everyone. Hopefully, soon we'll be able to get back in a regular schedule. I don't think I'll be able to do this. So, in 2 weeks is Anime USA, and so I think I won't be able to do that. But Oh, live action Full Metal Panic. That'd be interesting. Any shows in fall season I'm looking forward to? Slime, certainly. Let me just pull up the anime chart. Are they calling that Winter 2018 now? Apparently... No, that can't be right. Season... Fall? 2018? That's the one. Let's see here. Scrolling through. Not a huge amount, frankly, but that's typical for me. Goblin Slayer I'm curious about because it looks like they're trying to be pretty serious and gritty and bloody with it. Let's see here. I'm curious about the sumo anime. I'm also curious about the marathon racing anime. Kaze ga Tsuyoku Fuiteru. What else? Gridman. It's mecha, so it has my attention. Yeah, I think that was basically it in terms of the ones that really caught my eye. And again, Slime. Just skimming through them again. I'm mildly curious about the Ingress anime, just to see what their take on it is. Let's see. Yeah, and we'll try the other ones. It actually brings up something else I wanted to mention. Thanks for I'm not feeling unwell. I'm just feeling tired. I've not been watching Furikuri 3. I'm kind of waiting until both of them are done before I watch Furikuri. Remember the Monster live action adaptation? I think it's just in development hell. Hey, Yujiro. You caught me just as I'm about to finish up. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where they're still trying, but who knows if that'll ever happen. So Slime is variously called So I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, depending on how you translate it. And it's basically guy gets reincarnated as a slime, a first level monster in a dungeon or in a cave in a fantasy world, and tries to survive and figure out his world and ends up becoming more and more powerful and more powerful. And it's just a really fun kind of a play on fantasy worlds and the rules of fantasy worlds, and how, okay, if you fight this thing, you get this power. What does that mean? What can you actually do with that? So every power he gains is a very explicit thing that he uses to do the next thing and to kind of expand. But the nice thing is, like, he's not a jerk, the main character. In fact, I think he's like a middle-aged guy, and so he has this very like, he's trying to survive, but he's trying to do that in a way that doesn't hurt other people. But in this very it's a D&D style fantasy world, so there's a lot of killing going on. So it's kind of interesting. He eventually gets the body of a tween-age girl. Yes, I've been in Japan. I was in Japan for about 10 days in 2012. All on my lonesome. Not intentionally, but I intended to go to Japan, but I was going to go with a friend, and he had to back out. So it was just me, which was very, very overwhelming. But now I really want to go back. which I will once I actually get some money. Having been out of work for a couple of months, I now need to rebuild my savings, but that's pretty close. Actually, I've pretty much rebuilt my savings now, but now I need to pay back a loan, and then I can actually start spending money on fun things. I actually have a new monitor coming in on Monday, which will kind of finish out the streaming rig. The monitor I bought was one of these like really inexpensive, like $75 monitors, just to get something in there. And now I'm gonna go out. Oh, you're living in Japan now. Awesome. That's right. Of course. How did I forget? So how are things over there in Japan? What's been the biggest surprise? I will absolutely come visit Japan. You bet. Any regrets? There's a mild regret. I didn't go to the Ghibli Museum because you have to go to a Lawson's convenience store and use these basically ATMs, these little machines that are only in Japanese. So you have to have like a guide that tells you which buttons to press by looking at the kanji. And then when you do that, you can get a ticket, but you have to basically get a ticket for a certain day and time, and then show up on that day and time and present your ticket. And so it was really hard to, like I was there. I technically could have done it, but I never had the actual stuff with me. I just never really prioritized getting it done. So maybe next time. So it's one of those things where I don't beat myself up over it, because it was just there was so much for me to do and so much for me to kind of understand that I'm fine. I'm fine that I didn't stress myself out over that. Yeah, the natural disasters are nuts, aren't they? Really, really, really crazy. I've been reading a book, actually. Where is it? Where is it? Ah, it's up here somewhere. Ah, there it is. Goodbye Things by Fumio Sasaki, because you can't read. It's a book about minimalism, and he's saying, one of the things he says is that the recent natural disasters, especially the Tohoku earthquake, has caused a lot of Japanese people to kind of reevaluate their possessions and whether they really want to have a lot of stuff, or whether it would be better to live a more minimalist lifestyle. And so, yeah. Cool. You know what annoys me about YouTube is that I see I see everyone's thing. There it is. I have to click on the little ... to go to channel. I need to do that. Live in Tohoku. Wow. Yeah. What's it like there? Like, is there any sense? I saw actually an episode of Japanology Plus, saying that Tohoku has been really trying to do like stuff, advertisements for people out in the world, or rather in the world of Japan, to tell them, come to Tohoku. Like, it's fine here. Like, we're all fine. We're still alive. We need tourism. Do you have that sense? Like, does Tohoku feel different? Does it feel like they, they're not necessarily struggling, but it's kind of different? Yeah. Whoa. Sorry, just looking through. Yeah, Tokyo is just so urban. It is one of the most urban places I've ever been. Yeah. So that was the thing. That was my big shock. Going to Japan, where like the airport was fine because there's plenty of English there, and the train was fine because it's a train. But it was stepping out of the train station onto a normal Tokyo street, where suddenly you're just surrounded by all of these signs, where you don't even know what those symbols mean. They're just like, what street am I on? I have no way of knowing. That's interesting how Sendai is very rural. We should totally do like a video, Ginger Gaiden. We should like do some kind of. I should interview you about what it's like being in Japan. That'd be fun. Yeah, rural Japan is very different. Is it weird? Big cities, out of cities, all rice fields. Yeah. So I'm gonna say something that may sound odd. How many other non-Japanese people are there in Sendai? Like how many non-Japanese people do you see in a given day in Japan? Because that was a weird thing to me. Is I was like, I'm the only white guy. The only white person. Obviously, there were some places where there was some ethnic diversity, but yeah, the bullet train is awesome. The bullet trains are just like, yes, this is how to travel, like this all the time. If you want to get something of a sense of what a bullet train is like, not the speed or anything, but there's a thing called Norwegian slow TV, where they will like put a camera on the front of a train and just film it for like 9 hours. An entire route for one of these like cross-country trains in Norway. And you can, and you can just look up like Norway slow TV, and you'll get just a camera on the front of a train going through the countryside. That's very much what it feels like being on one of those bullet trains. Obviously, it can be going very fast, but you're just kind of watching the world go by. It's lovely. Yeah, no other white people outside of, once you get outside of the city, yeah. I got stares. I got, like, literally stared at when I was in a small village, basically, in Japan. Obviously not, it wasn't, I didn't feel uncomfortable, but I was definitely the only, the only non-Japanese people, they had seen in a very, very, very long time, if ever. There was this one, like, teenager. I was out walking, and he walked by, and I think I was the first white person he'd ever seen in his life. Like, there just would never have been an occasion for a white person to go to this tiny little, resort town deep in the heart of Japan. That's tough with discussions with just kind of interactions with people. I mean, one of the nice things is that, as I'm sure you experienced, any commercial interaction is very normal, very polite, very, there's no difference there versus other people. Obviously, they don't know who you are personally, but it's not like you go up to somebody at a cashier and they're like, I don't even know how to deal with you. But certainly on the street, it's kind of weird seeing that. There was this interesting episode of GeekArchaeology where a white guy walked down the street in some part of Tokyo asking people for help, asking people for directions, and he deliberately went up to older people. Hey, JPEG, thanks for stopping by. And they had a film camera filming this, and they showed that the older people refused to help him much more often than younger people. And when they went up afterwards to ask these, older, like retired age people why, it was because they felt they didn't know English well enough, that they didn't want to possibly lead him astray. It was a politeness thing, really, where they were like, I don't even know how to deal with somebody who doesn't speak Japanese. And so I'd rather he find somebody else to deal with him. I'm sure he's a nice person. But I thought that was really interesting. That it wasn't, ooh, white guy. It was, I might say the wrong thing and send him down the wrong path. So we'll just let somebody younger than me deal with it. Of course, maybe they were just saying that. I don't know. Who knows? But there's a great clip, and I wish I could show it to you. Speaking of wholesome interactions, right after Train Man came out, Densho Otoko, there was one of these Japanese late night talk shows, although they're not late at night actually, where they do where they looked at this phenomenon, and so they actually set up in an alleyway in, I think it was in the otaku neighborhood. Why can't I remember the name of it? My mind is going. It's very annoying. I was there like 3 times when I was in Japan. So they set up in an alleyway a confrontation between a man and a woman. And the man was kind of berating her and being very aggressive, and she was kind of shrinking back. And they had like a maid stationed out front who was handing out flyers and driving people into the back to some random event. And the idea was they had hidden cameras to see how these actual otaku would deal with a woman actually being harassed in real life. And so they filmed this happening, and there were a couple of guys who just went by, and there were some who intervened. The best moment was a guy about 30 years old in full Cardcaptor Sakura cosplay, who came down, saw this, and said, hey you, and came down and like got in between the two of them and like totally and grabbed the girl and pulled her out of the way, pulled her out of the alleyway. Really, really sweet. And so at the end they said, okay, so then we actually tabulated the percentage. So we did this 100 times. And so we've tabulated how many otaku intervened and how many didn't. And at the end, there's just Japanese all defined right there. I think it was 97% of otaku intervened in some way. Some were kind of muted about it, but almost everybody actually, it may have been 87% now that I think about it. It's probably 87%. 87% of otaku actually would rescue a girl in real life who was being harassed, which was quite sweet. But yeah, the skirt, whole 9 yards. The guys, it was. But yeah, that made me feel good. And otaku do know how to stand up for what's right. And on that note, I think we will end for the night. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Ginger. Thank you, everyone else, for joining me tonight. This has been a lot of fun. I will be doing this again next week. Again, I think it'll just be a chat. I might bring in a few topics. We got Anime Club tomorrow afternoon, starting at 2 p.m. And then next weekend, something really fun. On Saturday, I'm going to do a Rabbit stream, a Rabbit private chat room, where I'm going to watch all of the new shows coming out this season. So head on to the Discord, and I get a link there. And I have a link over at GeekArchaeology.com. There's a link to the Discord there. And I'll drop a link in Discord to that chat room. And if you stop by, then I will. You can head in, and I will be streaming in Rabbit all the anime this season. So that should be a lot of fun. So thank you. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks everyone else. This feels good being back here, and hopefully we will be doing that soon. So again, that all day thing is next week, not tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be watching Nadia and the Secret of Blue Water, the first 4 episodes. in a rabbit chat room. So that should be fun. I've been meaning to get back into Nadia. So thank you all very much. See ya. Have a great weekend.